Want to, okay, now.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is a public meeting and it is being recorded. We just want to quickly let you guys know some information. In order to quickly get the community's needs and applications for this funding will be considered on a rolling basis until the fund is exhausted. The organizations whose applications are being reviewed today may be asked to participate in the meeting by providing comments when asked a question by the Pinellas Cares Nonprofit Partnership Fund Grant Committee. If you are attending the Zoom meeting by computer or other smart device, you will be unmuted to respond back and to any given questions from the Grants Committee in the Zoom app. You will have 3 minutes to respond to each question. If attending the Zoom meeting by phone only, you will be unmuted when it is your turn to speak, and then you will need to press *6 on your phone to unmute yourself. If you are representing an organization whose application will be reviewed today, please enter your name and the organization's name into the chat function of Zoom so that we can recognize you if questions are asked of you from the committee. At the conclusion of your comments, you will be muted again. Please note that all committee members and staff participants in this meeting have signed a conflict of interest form. And for those of you who are viewing this via YouTube or recording and would like to provide feedback on the grant process, you can submit those comments to caresfeedback@pinellascf.org, and we will respond to your comments as soon as possible. However, this feedback will not be answered live. And that's all I got.
Thank you very much, Brittany. Good afternoon, everybody. I am taking the briefly taking Sally Parks's spot and will chair today's meeting. We have our committee assembled, and then Alithia Stanfield, who's also a member of this committee, knew previously that she could not attend today but has scored. And then Cherie will be sharing comments that Alithia provided to us that she would like shared about the 2 applications we're reviewing today. So we'll go through the agenda. I am not voting today, but I am simply allowing the chairing of this committee. So we will begin with a fund status update. We have 2 applications that are up for review, a good reminder of next steps, and then we'll adjourn our meeting today. And so, Cherie, if you'd like to start with the fund status update, please.
Thanks so much, Duggan. So a little bit about where we are and what we've been up to over the past few weeks. The Pinellas Cares currently has approved $13,252,693.30, and we have remaining $14,647,306.70. To the right, you can see our pie chart that gives you a little bit of information around how it is that we have funded. About 54% of all of our awarding has been done around food insecurity, 29% around behavioral health, and 17% around eviction mitigation. Don't forget, this is how much funding has been approved by the committee, not how much has actually been distributed by the committee. Next slide, please. So weekly summary. This week we have 2 requests before us. It totals $1,769,253. Next slide, please. And so we are on and ready for a conversation regarding our first applicant, PACE Center for Girls. Before we begin, right, David, can you double check to ensure that we have a representative? Chantel Miles is also on the line. Perfect. Just want to make sure she's present. And I see that Patrick is present as well. Duggan, I'll turn it over to you.
Very good. So the collective score of the committee is here, as well as the individual members of the committee. There are some pieces of commentary from the committee. So we'll go ahead and dive right into this. I'll find out first if anybody would like to jump in with their own questions or comments so we can get them addressed by the representative from PACE today.
And Duggan, just so you are aware, and the committee is aware, this is an organization that I have been working with over the past week to further understand not just their application, but also their reimbursement request and the amount that they are looking for us to move forward. And so we do have updated documentation for both of those. And I am happy to walk through and explain those, especially when it comes to the questions regarding reimbursement. I am happy to address those. And if need be, we can absolutely unmute Chantel Miles, who I've been working with as executive director to answer additional questions.
Very
And
good.
we have
Thank you.
updated documentation as well.
Yes.
And when it comes to that time, David can go ahead and screen share that for the benefit of the committee. So we'll see if our committee members want to jump in with any of their questions or comments, please.
Again, this is Barbara. If I may, at some point, I'd like to talk about the evaluation measures for this project, and I've been working with Chantel on them.
Okay, very good.
We
Thank
do
you.
also have the updated evaluation to share with the committee as well today. So we can also put that up online so that everyone
Excellent.
can see it.
All right, let's hear from our committee members. Who would like to ask the first question or make some comments, please? Jump right in. I don't think I can see everybody on the screen.
Or Duggan, maybe go ahead.
I'll go ahead and start. My comments were reflected in some of the others with regards to the invoices for the purchased equipment as well as the planned purchases, estimate of cost. We're not in the document summary. Sherry, have you worked with them to get that updated?
Yes, Carrie, I have. So thank you so much for asking that question. I have been, as I mentioned, working with PACE. And so what you will see is an updated reimbursement template. We have reviewed all of their expenditures along with receiving the proper documentation. That's why, Dave, if you could stop for just a second, if you'll scroll up for just a minute. Their reimbursement request amount, scroll down just a little bit.
Oh, there it is.
Yep, $48,622.66. We have gone through, we have reviewed, ensured that what they were asking for complements what the need is. And I do have through the budget narrative, which I am happy to share with you, and David can pop it up on the screen, how it is that these costs relate directly into the work that they have been doing. They've also given a robust justification as for how it is directly COVID related, and then provided the backup documentation when necessary as well. So David, if you don't mind just scrolling down just so that our committee can see the documentation that PACE has provided to us to help us understand the expenditures. And all of this information has been uploaded and is also available in their actual application as well.
And I would be clear that it's available in the application file, but not the application that's seen by the committee right now.
Thank you, Duggan. Absolutely. So it is a pretty lengthy document. I was actually laughing with Chantel because I had to send it as 3 separate attachments, but I can assure you that everything is there.
And so maybe we could go back to the summary of the expenses, sort of knowing that we have appropriate backup that substantiates these, and maybe concentrate, if there's questions about the nature of the expenditures, maybe we concentrate on that and ask some questions that might be related to the actual expenditure themselves, knowing that we've received better documentation substantiating the actual expense.
Yeah, thank you for that, Doug. And that was essentially one of the questions that I had, specifically about the mics, the webcams. The paperwork that we received, those costs weren't spelled out. And so were mics and webcams a separate purchase? And if so, why, was that, why was that necessary, as opposed to, say, maybe using the cams and mics that are native to most laptops?
So thank you, Pastor
Right.
Senior, for that question. That was actually one of my initial questions, and I will also allow time for Chantel to weigh in. In their updated budget narrative, they did give a lot of additional detail around the purchase of the laptops, specifically why they were needed and why these specific laptops were needed. The current laptops that have been provided by the school district, number one, were not enough for all of the girls to have access to one, as well as the behavioral health therapist needed one. And so for them to be compliant with behavioral health services and to allow them to have therapy sessions digitally, they needed to have the updated laptops along with cameras and mics. It was also clear that they needed to have access to ample security in terms of their behavioral health services. And so that's why what is it called? Docu something. It's the other software that they purchased to go along with it, relates directly back to their upgrades for direct behavioral health services for the girls in the program.
Right. So my question wasn't related to the necessity of the purchases themselves. I fully support that. It was just, in regards to, was it necessary to purchase mics and webcams in addition to the laptops, when most laptops come with cameras and mics that are, pretty, pretty sufficient.
So I will ask you to unmute Chantel to answer that question. My understanding is that they purchased new laptops because with the school laptops that they were using previously, they did not have cameras and laptops. So Chantel, if you could, or David, if you could unmute Chantel to answer that question.
She can unmute. I asked her to unmute, or she has the option to.
There it is. Okay, can you hear me now?
We
Yes.
can.
Hi, thank you everyone for your time. So we purchased laptops as well as the webcams. The laptops that were provided by the district do not have the capabilities of having webcams or microphones. So we purchased 40 laptops initially. We're serving 57 girls at this time. So not every girl has a new laptop. We have put in a request for future expenses to purchase an additional 20 laptops so that every girl in the program would have a newer laptop, and then we would just house the webcams and the mics here at the center in case we need them for anything else.
I think that makes more sense now that it's not redundant of the systems, but it was separately for ones that didn't have the capability. I think that makes me feel better about the purchase along with the additional laptops. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarity. Same here. Thank you.
David, if you want to pop back up the spreadsheet, I don't know if anyone has of the reimbursement request, because it seems there was not sufficient support for that. So I want to see if anyone has additional questions about the items in this system, in the reimbursement portion of the request.
I've got a couple questions just because this request is very different from the one that we reviewed. The one that we reviewed had some food involved and also salary for the admin assistant. So does their overall budget change now that they're not requesting that as reimbursement, and they added a bunch of sanitation items that were not in the budget that we reviewed?
So Lisa, before you move from there, David, if you notice, there is funding put in there for the salary increase for the part-time to full-time for the admin assistant. So that is on line item number 3. So they are asking us for that in 2 different parts. Well, you will see a little later. They actually have 2 different budget summaries, which I think that's much easier. There's a budget summary for reimbursement and one for the moving forward. So they are asking us to recoup a bit of time for the admin assistant from March through August. And then moving forward, they're asking us for some funding too. The total request that they have asked us for has not changed since their initial request was put in. David, if you could just pop back up the initial screen, please, with reviewer comments, so I can just share back where the total amount is. There we go. So the total amount of their request is still $89,829.48. That amount has not changed. What has been tweaked is their reimbursement request and the amount that's moving forward as they, as we went through the process of actually breaking out and teasing out those 2 expenses.
Okay. Then I do have another question in regards to, it says the HVAC systems, the purification, that's just for the purification of the HVAC, that's not like a new HVAC component.
You are correct. I will also ask Chantel if you could please unmute yourself and give some more context and clarity to that. Lisa, just so you're aware, the organization did provide robust detail, including a letter from the landlord indicating why that was done and their portion that they had to pay.
I just wanted to make sure I understood what the line item was. Like I said, that wasn't initially, so I didn't have a chance to pour through it. So I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Yes, you're absolutely correct.
Thank you.
And I guess my question about it is a little bit more to Lisa's point. Is it the purification system, or is it an HVAC system, or is it a purification system with HVAC together? That's I think part of the heart of what we need to get to, because then the question next is, how is that COVID related? That I guess is so to clearly understand what exactly was purchased. It says HVAC, but so we need to know, is it an air conditioning system, a purification system, or both combined?
Or service it. Like I understood it as maybe services. So yeah, an explanation would be helpful.
So it's a purification and ionization system that our landlord had installed onto all of the units. We currently share a facility with 2 other organizations, and one of our partners was really concerned about us having girls return to the center, and because we all share the same air conditioning system, was really concerned about the spread of COVID. So research was done, and in conjunction with all of the other precautions that we have put in place, the landlord felt that that was beneficial for the entire complex. So it wasn't an option for us. We had to pay for that. And I've also provided just a little bit of research regarding how the HEPA filters and the ionization are beneficial, or research is showing that it's beneficial as it relates to COVID.
When used in tandem with other practices.
Correct, which we're doing all of that.
So to that point, David, can you show the landlord letter, please, then? I think that's included as part of the packet.
Did it go too far? Well, we have an email thread.
Okay.
And I just, another question, is this something that just recently came up? Like, why wasn't this in the original request at all? I feel like it's a pretty significant, purchase. Obviously I understand the need, but it wasn't even requested in the packet that we had gotten.
I'll speak to that. It wasn't in the original packet because honestly, I didn't know it was something that was reimbursable. And after doing more research, I was like, oh, this is something an expense that we clearly were not planning for, but it was reimbursable. So we included it.
All right. Anyone else have any other questions about the HVAC and I guess the ionization system?
I don't have a question for that. I'm waiting to hear from the evaluator. She has some comments. If it's not time for that, then I can wait, but I would like to hear from the evaluation.
I did want to hear one item about how the increase to the administrative assistant is COVID related.
Sure. So we decided in July to make our administrative assistant full-time as we were looking at how we would return to the center with the girls, because girls aren't allowed to congregate in one area. The girls spend a lot of their time in the classrooms. They have breakfast in the classroom, lunch in the classroom. So it requires more hands on deck to make sure that everything is in place. The administrative assistant has increased her hours because she helps with ensuring that program and all of the equipment is clean for the girls every day. She jumps in, say, if I have to cover a class or a counselor's covering a class, she's there to just provide additional support. She helps with lunch distribution to the classes. So we've increased her hours because we just need more manpower around the center.
Okay, thank you. And then Barbara, do you want to share your feedback about evaluation? That this is probably a good time.
Happy to, and I'm going to make 3 points. The first writing of the evaluation section, I thought was both overly ambitious and underdeveloped in a number of ways. First of all, there was a reference to the CFARS instrument, which was just mentioned in name with no descriptive information about what the scale was, its dimensions. And so I thought that that needed to be further evaluated. What you're looking at on the screen is the modification. Also, in the original proposal, there was just a simple statement that there would be an 80% reduction in the problems that the girls presented. Now, I've had experience working with PACE, and I know some of the problems that the PACE population generally brings. And I think an 80% reduction of their problems in 2 months was completely unreasonable. That's not, I don't think that that's going to happen, that you're going to see an 80% reduction in their problems in 2 months. So I had a conversation with Chantel and we went back and forth. And with my recommendation, I actually thought if you could get some of those CFARS scores down by half, a 50% reduction per month in 2 months, that was a good clinical outcome. And that's what I recommended that she use. A couple of lessons emerged for me in looking at this particular grant. And if there are persons on the call who are planning to submit behavioral health applications coming forward, number one, when I talked to Chantel, it was clear that she did not really know this measure. Someone had maybe recommended it to her, but the fact that she was making, putting out outcomes like that led me to believe that maybe she didn't really understand it. And I found out that she's just learning about the CFARS and how to use it. And so she's going to need some technical assistance and has it in the application, scoring, and interpretation of those scores. So the first object lesson is you probably should not put forward an instrument in behavioral health that you have no understanding and experience with. It's probably not a good idea. Or if you do, you ought to say how you're going to get some technical assistance in the application and interpretation of it. The other thing is, remember that sometimes I think applicants feel that they have to put a very high outcome marker in order to impress us. That's really dangerous, because what it usually signals to people who know the population and the measures is that you are probably unrealistic about what you're going to achieve. I would much rather see an outcome that I think is probably achievable, rather than trying to overstate one to impress the committee that is really not realistic. So that's just some advice for anybody who might be listening in terms of behavioral health going forward. So what you see written now, which is in front of you, I thought was a significant improvement over what was originally stated. This reflects my input for Chantel. And so this is what she's putting forward based on my recommendation.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions for Barbara that relate to the change in the updated methodology for the measurement of the outcomes at the program? All right. Let's go back to the slide with our questions and comments. I think we may have resolved our questions around the reimbursement request, and that is more clear now. So want to find out if the committee has any other questions about the application itself.
I've got more questions about the budget. Could we see the updated budget summary and or narrative, because the reimbursement request has added quite a bit of cleaning supplies that were not in the original request, and if their overall request has not changed dollar-wise, I'm curious to see where that money came, like where it was deducted from, if it came from the meals or equipment.
So this is the most updated. So in here, I am to assume that this is inclusive of both, because the total matches the total request.
You are correct.
Has the narrative been updated as well?
It has been. David, if you want to possibly pull up the narrative, please.
I don't have an updated budget narrative, just the summary. Just one second.
Sure.
I only have the summary.
Okay. Give me just a moment, and I will send that over to you to be pulled up. And Brittany actually might have updated it already in the actual application that was completed. Brittany, did you have a moment to update it in the actual application?
I'm looking through now to see if I think I only had the summary, but I can go back through and check the emails.
Okay.
Okay, why don't we, while we're sorting that out, and we'll get an answer to that question, why don't we keep going and see if there are other questions as we go forward. Lisa, did you have other non-budget pieces that you had questions about?
No, sir, it was just the budget.
Okay, all right.
As I mentioned earlier, they have, there are 3 separate emails that they had to send so that we could receive all of this information. So let me think through the best way to send it so that we can project it to everyone as well. So yes, let's move on to the next one. I've got it here. I've just got to send these 3 separate documents over to David.
That's fine. Go ahead and send those over to David, and I'll see if there are other additional questions, maybe programmatic questions or questions that you have that might not be budget related at the moment. And maybe there aren't.
Sure.
Okay. We'll wait for just a minute.
David, hopefully you have the narrative. You'll be receiving the narrative shortly.
Email takes a second.
Yeah.
This is the fun of running through a process like this. This is quick moving, but not wanting to confuse people by changing out segments of the application in the midst of your review. So we'll get it here, and we'll make sure that we have an opportunity to ask questions with the updates
So this is
on screen.
Only for the future looking expenses.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
And there's a separate budget narrative for the reimbursement as well.
Got it. And so why don't we, to that end, Lisa, why don't you start with your questions, and then maybe we could go to this segment of that and see what has been answered here that might give clarity.
I was just curious overall, because they had added a significant amount of cleaning services and supplies and such that weren't in the original. So in order for their bottom line to stay roughly the same, I was curious if, they had pulled the funding from a certain area. Just looking at the summary, it looks like the majority of the funding was pulled from personnel. So I understand that. So that was my biggest question. Like, I just want to make sure they didn't pull, the $10,000 from the meals, because that's a very important piece, I would think,
Right.
In a feeding application.
Right.
So I just wanted to be able, without having that knowledge, like it's a pretty significant change to the reimbursement request from what we had. So I feel like there's a lot of things that we might need to kind of pour through to make sure that, you know, we're still comfortable with moving forward the way that we had originally thought.
Makes sense.
So Chantel, if you could, maybe you can walk us through and explain some of the differences in terms of what you're asking us for in terms of looking forward. Maybe we can just walk the expenses that might be easier, just scan through the actual personnel amount, salary, supplies, and that sort of thing. That might be easiest. Lisa, would that help maybe perhaps answer your question? Or do you want David just to scroll through what's easiest for you?
For me personally, even if we just kind of scroll through the sections, I mean, I can see that a significant amount came from personnel, and that's fine, but I just want to make sure, you know, like the same equipment items that we had looked at, just so if there's anything else that we might have questions on that might not have been in there before, if, you know, if things have come and gone from the breakdown.
Sure.
And I can speak to that quickly. Lisa, you're correct. It did come from the personnel. We didn't change any of the equipment, and we are still providing the food. Initially, when we submitted the application, we submitted the amount the total amount to move the administrative assistant from part-time to full-time. Upon review, we realized, oh no, we couldn't do it for the entire year. So we just could only include what actually would be the amount that would be charged to the grant. So that's why there is such a significant difference with personnel, but the food, the equipment, that's still the same.
Understandable.
Let me know if there's a specific part you'd like me to scroll to, or if you're just reading.
I'm just kind of skimming through. But for the purchase services, I know originally it was like $1,260 for the, I think it's like Doxy Me. The reimbursement had asked for $1,050. So that didn't line up, but is that for like future use, and is that still in there?
Yes.
Okay.
So we've used Doxy.me, and then we plan to use it for November and December. So that's the difference in the future in the reimbursement.
Okay. That's fine. I just wanted to know if there were anything else that may have been pulled out or whatever, and it appears that it's not. So I think my questions have been answered. I don't know if anybody else has any, but
Mr.
just want to
Chair,
make sure I fully understood.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Mr. Chair, do we have enough to call for a motion, or more discussion is required?
I'll ask if there are any additional questions. It seemed we now have answers on the reimbursement. Things are more clear. Those were answered. It seems that at the moment we've got answers on the future looking expenses. Any other questions that anybody has and wants answered? Then I think we'll go ahead and entertain a motion at the pleasure of someone on the committee.
Motion to advance.
Second.
And that was, looks like Carl and Carrie.
Yes, sir.
All right, any discussion from the committee? Any further questions about the proposal?
Is this for the whole proposal or the reimbursement, or both?
I think, Carl, is this for the entirety? Let's give a dollar amount for this. Is this for the 89? The total request is for 89,000. The total request. Okay, and Carrie, that's for the total request?
Yes.
All right, so the motion and the second really are for the total request, both parts totaling slightly more than $89,000. Any questions about that? All right, hearing none, then we'll take a vote from the committee. All those in favor, if you would raise your hand, please. All right, looks like all of our committee members, and if you are opposed, go ahead and raise your hand. All right, no one in opposition. That motion passes, and as today's chair, I'm not voting. So thank you very much for that, and thank you to Chantel for being with us today, answering questions and turning back information so we could get that reviewed today. Much appreciated. All right, let's go on to today's second proposal from Feeding Tampa Bay. The requested amount is a little more than $1.6 million. Yes. We have an average score of 89 from the committee, but there are still, I believe, some questions. So we'll just open it up and start with questions that the committee may have. And Carrie.
I'll start since I'm unmuted. I had some questions about, I mean, their start date was in September. They selected no in terms of not going for any cost reimbursement, but here we are effectively through the first 2 months of the 4 that they were predicting for. With the terms of the grant, it's from here to day unless they submit for cost reimbursement, correct?
Generally, it's for going forward. Some organizations have some challenge understanding how the application is constructed and don't request in the reimbursement section, and that gets thrown into their actual budget. So we can go ahead and ask that question of, we have Patrick from Feeding Tampa Bay, and maybe Cherie, you might have some insight to some conversations you've had with Patrick as to the time frame. If what was presented began back in September.
No, I think it's best if we unmute and we allow Patrick in Feeding Tampa Bay to answer that question. We have many conversations about reimbursement, the reimbursement period, and what would make the most sense with what their needs are. Okay. Patrick, are you there?
He's able to unmute himself. There he is.
Hi, yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for your time and your review. So yeah, to answer the question, so the expenses that we have proposed in this grant, some do go into the past from this very date. They do not meet the requirements in the application that the expenses were drawn from a reserve, and therefore don't have the associated documentation like board minutes and the other things that are in the RFP. So if I can provide an example, there might be some costs that were incurred in our service in September or October, so up until this point, that have been, the services have been provided, but there are unpaid invoices. And so it's not a paid expense drawn from those reserves, but rather an expense related to the project that has not been paid yet. And so I see there's somewhat of like maybe an in-between area between reimbursement and from this date forward. That's how I read the application, and that's how I wrote the proposal. So I'm happy to answer any other clarifying questions on that note.
So I guess to that point, you have invoices from September that remain unpaid?
Correct. So that, so I'll provide some more details. So things like staff salaries, are paid every 2 weeks, so those are not included. If you look through the budget narrative, there's a difference in the number of weeks for different line items. So staff salaries, for example, under personnel, go from around the application date forward. But trying to find another example, looking at the narrative. I think the food, though, we would have purchased food for the various programs in September or October, and the invoices haven't been paid yet.
I guess from our perspective, the things don't necessarily have to arise from reserves. That's one way that we can substantiate that it was paid for with very clearly paid for with non-federal funding, wanting to make sure that we don't supplant any existing federal programming that's there. And so one of the cleanest ways to do that is offer some form of reimbursement for private paid stuff. I don't see much issue going back to paying things in September if they're justified expenditures for programmatic expansion, which I think in the narrative, much of this is explained, that the mega pantries are COVID-19 related. And you have specific staff that are associated with those. So some of that makes sense. I guess the question then comes down to When is that expense going to be? I guess the expense has been incurred but hasn't been paid. And typically in our reimbursement world, you know, we're looking for substantiation of paid expenses. When is the anticipated date of payment for something that goes back to September?
Yeah, I think it would vary by purchase. So, you know, we're routinely making purchases from a food supplier, and so you know, there might be a purchase. There would be multiple purchases on multiple days through September through October. So it would have to be based on the individual cost. Which, you know, we would certainly have the invoice documentation to provide if that's what the committee would need in order to approve this.
Yeah, it'll definitely need to be provided in advance of payment. I don't know. The committee will take its vote and ask its questions today. That's not an issue. We're not going to pay for it until we have the proper documentation. I guess I'm just not understanding. These days, I don't know of many suppliers who like wait for 2 months to get paid. That I guess is my question.
Right. I suppose I'd have to confer with my finance department about which of those expenses are paid and unpaid.
Got it.
And again, the choice to include that in the request as it is, rather than in the reimbursement section, was based on the understanding that we would have to draw from reserves. I think the term used was rainy day fund in the past. So that might just be, you know, a matter of changing what part of the application that goes into, and happy to update that as needed.
Sure. And I think
the question, I feel like I'm still leaving something unresolved, but I want to try to give as much information as possible.
Sure. And for us, really, those are examples in the application under reimbursement. We have other agencies that have combined sort of everything into their narrative, and some of it reflects stuff done in the past. Some of it reflects stuff done in the future. We just were sort of teasing that out with PACE before, and they have now, you know, sort of given more clear documentation of what's past and what's future. So it doesn't necessarily have to come from a rainy day fund or reserve, but we are interested in knowing what funding source was used to pay and to pay the expense. And we can collect that documentation. And we can work with a grantee. It's not an issue. We can work with the grantee to substantiate all the pieces, because we have to follow, you know, federal guidelines for that. I guess I'll leave it at that. I want to find out if the committee has additional questions or wants to know other things.
Got a question about some of the positions. It states in the narrative that the same positions back in February were paid a certain amount, and then moving forward for this period, all of the positions, the cost per hour has increased by $4. Can you speak to that increase, please?
Yeah, definitely. So with an increased focus kind of in all sectors on equity, diversity, and inclusion, Feeding Tampa Bay performed a review of compensation across all positions at all levels, and that occurred over the summer. So those positions, salaries or hourly wage would have been increased from February at the time that we made those increases across our organization. I think in August is when that took effect, August or September. So that represents the increase in hourly wage.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. That was also another comment of one of the reviewers who emailed me separately about that. So thank you for the clarity.
Of course.
I had a question just about the the listed compensation for who would be servicing this particular grant within the organization? There were like 2 people listed for compensation to service this grant. Could you kind of explain that arrangement?
I've got more than 2 people's names in the budget narrative. Are you referring to a couple of people in particular? Or I might be looking at the wrong section.
Hold on, let me pull it up.
I specifically named some of our leadership and their oversight of the program, as well as human resources, finance reporting, and myself as grant reporting. And then a number of the other positions were unnamed. For example, our drivers team is about 40 different people. And while we typically assign those folks to the same distribution or the same route, there is some fluctuation based on schedules and availability and needs that pop up. So so they're kind of reported as a group that that work on those different projects.
Okay, yeah, I was just looking at I guess specifically the grant account. Sarah Mazzola, and then the development officer.
Oh, sure.
Assuming that's you, right? And so you're both listed as reporting for this grant.
Correct. Yeah, we'll both be working on reporting. Sarah would be focused more specifically on the finance reporting. She also just started with us literally last week. So she wouldn't be able to 100% jump into the position immediately. But in addition to that, there's the service reporting that she would only be working on finance. So that's where I'm cited as working on reporting service numbers to the for the grant.
And I think why we're starting to see positions like this in grants is because there is no longer an option for charging an administrative cost at any particular rate. Organizations have to include under the grant the actual staff positions that they would be claiming that relate to the administration of this grant or administration of the program, detail out their hours. And then they also, as part of their reporting, should they be awarded, need to substantiate that they actually worked on the particular program funded by CARES. So that's a requirement. So it can't be an administrative rate anymore, and they have to include the positions. But then they, on the back end, this is just a budget on the back end, they have to substantiate that with detailed information, time cards, or some other time tracking method for the amount of time spent on CARES.
Okay, thank you.
So Patrick, as it relates to that question, another question from a committee member is, can you speak a little bit more to the Mega Pantry Task Force member, exactly what the task force does and how it is that this person will be utilized and what exactly it is that they'll be doing?
Sure. Yeah. So task force member is a larger team of task force members. So again, that's why there's not a particular person named. But this person fills a similar role to our mobile pantry coordinator at our mobile pantries. So in Pinellas County, we have a weekly mega pantry that's held at Tropicana Field, during which up to about 1,000 households are served. We have teams of 20 to 30 volunteers. And so the mega pantry task force member is the leader of that distribution. So they're kind of the point person for volunteers who are coming to assist. They're the person who makes contact, directs those volunteers. as we distribute food and otherwise help people. And also coordinates our driver team that's on site during the mega pantry. There's 4 drivers that will be there every week as well. So they're the point person for the distributions. And you'll see they're working 8 hours per mega pantry. So that includes the loading up trucks in the morning from our distribution center in Tampa, and the setup, the breakdown on either side of the actual distribution.
Thanks so much.
Of course.
Are there other questions from the committee?
I've got another one in regards to, it states that for the, looks like mega pantry, like $612,000 in food has already been ordered. And then it states we will purchase $400,000 of food before December 30th to be distributed. I just wanted to seek clarification, I guess probably from staff. I know typically for grants, you have to, if you're purchasing something, it needs to be invoiced and distributed or utilized before the end date. I don't know if that's the case here, but it sounds like they're just going to purchase before December 30th and then use it for future outside of the performance period. Is that allowable?
The goal needs to be that the distribution take place before December 30th.
Okay.
It really needs to be the intent. If there is something that delays that and they can't, so say they were going to do, they purchased a bunch of food to do a December 26th event and we had a major weather problem and they had to cancel the event,
Right.
but they still had inventory and the next closest day was January 2nd, I think we'd be okay.
Right.
So we just have to clarify with the grantee and ensure that the intent is for the distribution to be done of those foods by December 30th.
Okay.
The intent needs to be there.
And Lisa, thanks so much for that comment, because that's applicable not just this grant partner, but to any grant partner that's utilizing our funds. And so absolutely Feeding Tampa Bay has just heard your comment and concern. And so the expectation very clearly will be that it will be distributed prior to December the 30th, purchased and distributed.
Thank you.
Yeah, my comment is probably a compliment and a comment, knowing just how critical the scenario is for citizens of our county going into the holiday season. When in effect, if you have been impacted by COVID-19 and you've not built up momentum in your cash flow, then the capacity of pantry servers like Feeding and others needs to be in place before September through the end of the calendar year. So to me, as much as we can do in this space to mitigate this and get folks ready to go is very important. It's evaluation and due diligence notwithstanding. It still is critical capacity that we need going into the holiday season, realizing that a lot of people still have not found work since COVID-19 hit our county. FYI on that.
Yes. Yes.
I just had a comment. There's, we're funding the majority, 54%, I think was mentioned in food service programs. Just if there was a way to connect or inform each other of who's serving what. So we've invested a lot of money in these programs. And so I just wanted to, it would be nice if they could be aware of who's, so I'm sure several of them are members or receive food from Feeding Tampa Bay, but it would be nice to be aware of who's providing food where, if that's something
Sure.
that staff can do.
Yeah, so that absolutely makes sense, Erin, if you're talking about all of our food providers across Pinellas Cares. Actively on our website, we do have uploaded links to everyone in terms of strategic priority areas. So anyone, whether an individual, whether or not you work in that specific priority area, you can see what other programs have been funded and exactly what they're doing. So that information is available, on our website. And of course, many of the nonprofits are actively advertising or educating the community about their services and about their programmatic services. So oftentimes you will see throughout the budget narratives an opportunity for them to share back with us, this is how we intend to reach out and engage the community around our program services. And oftentimes that does include having that conversation across organizations, because as you know, not everyone has access to transportation and that sort of thing. And so it's really important that they communicate about this is where you can go to have ability to obtain food if you're food insecure directly, hopefully within walking distance. That is always our goal.
Good.
And I think something that is slightly different too is now that they've been doing the mega pantry work, it brings a large influx of food into the community on a particular day. Whereas some of the organizations that participate in the whole network related to emergency food are providing a few days worth of support to individuals or are providing staples. And so if families are able to avail themselves of both kinds of assistance, it really can help supplement what the family gets. And the other part is we've done some funding of infrastructure for some organizations who have been very clear that they're partners with Feeding Tampa Bay or they're partners with other organizations. But because of the volume of requests they're receiving through their organization, they needed some infrastructure assistance. And then having that, then they would be able to receive more food and support from organizations like Feeding Tampa Bay. They could withstand a greater influx of assistance that they couldn't before to meet the need out the front door. So I think that's important to note too.
Excellent.
What other questions does the committee have?
I have one more, just in regards to the local mileage. The rate is per hour. So I just wanted to see clarification. Is that being paid to the truck rental company in addition to the rent? Who is that being paid to at an hourly rate?
Yeah, so the hourly rate is one that we've developed that includes the costs of fuel and insurance for our trucks. So the actual documentation would not be provided at an hourly rate because there's multiple actual invoices paid or expenses paid that would add up to that total. But it's a clean way to show the expenses to our organization for the activities that we're proposing.
Okay. And they say typically that it's done a certain rate per mileage, that usually factors in wear and tear and that type of thing, versus hourly. I don't know if anybody else has any other experience on, I've just never seen mileage calculated per hour like that. So it confused me a little bit.
Is part of this, Patrick, maybe because in some of these situations, like a mobile pantry, you would be using a refrigerated truck. So there would be fuel expenses associated with using a refrigerated truck while it's parked, even though it might not be moving and incurring costs in that way. Is that why you have developed a sort of an hourly rate for things like that?
That's one part of it. Yeah, exactly. So when if you were to go out on the market and purchase a used refrigerated truck, one of the statistics that they would give you would be like the hours of refrigerator running time in its history. So exactly, there's not mileage for that time, but you are using fuel, and so you calculate it per hour. And so that, to add a little bit more about how we got to that number, it's the expenses for all of the trucks over the course of a year, divided by the number of hours that trucks are providing program services. And so it works out to $21.88. But yes, what Duggan just described is included in that calculation.
Okay, that's helpful to know. But you all, as part of claiming this, will be substantiating that rate by providing actual, invoice and backup support that gets you the actual cost. You're using this more or less as a forecasting tool for budgeting.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. That definitely helped.
Thank you.
Great. Other questions from the committee? What's the pleasure of the committee regarding this proposal?
I'll venture forward with a motion to approve the grant as written for the full amount of $1,679,395.28, and assume that the Pinellas Community Foundation will make sure that things are appropriately accounted for and et cetera as they do their due diligence in paying out this grant.
Thank you. Is there someone on the committee that would like to second that?
I'll second.
Aaron, thank you. Any further comments from the committee or questions?
Yeah, I like
before a vote?
Aaron's comments in regards to if there's a way to notify providers that at some point, maybe it's mid-November, Duggan, that we list the food systems that we funded through CARES. And maybe there's a way to just let people know that these are the dollars that are available, or these are the organizations that are been resourced by CARES to do food capacity in certain segments of our county, so that maybe there could be sister relationships going on here or some sort of a way to connecting to build local capacity in this space. It's just so important to happen right now. It's a 5 loaves, 2 fishes, Pastor, conversation. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And I just think it'll be good to have some connections there.
Thank you, Carl. Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor of funding this according to the motion, raise your hand, please. All right, that appears to be most of the committee. Anyone opposed, please raise your hand. I don't see anyone in opposition. All right, then we will go ahead and move this forward, make sure that we get all the proper documentation. And just so everyone knows, just as a reminder for the next steps in the process, we take the committee's recommendations, we send those to Pinellas County. They conduct a review of their own, send back any additional questions or adjustments that need to be made. And then we move forward to signing an agreement with the organization, and they take it from there. We're knee deep in the middle of it with many grantees that have been approved by the committee before. So those are our next steps in the process. Is there anything that you want to do, Cherie, to wrap us up?
No,
Any other comments?
no. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, committee.
Yes, Carlos.
And I'm sorry, my mic wasn't working. I just wanted to be clear. And so the September cost so none of those costs are considered reimbursable. I couldn't remember if that was resolved.
So they can be considered reimbursable, and we're going to have to work with the grantee at the amount that was approved. We're going to have to work with them because that will be before the performance period for their grant. We will have to work with them to make sure that we have the proper documentation. We're going to most likely to get to the 1.6 million, have to treat it as a reimbursement. We're going to have to go through the process to substantiate the expense, substantiate that it was for COVID-19 related expansion of programming. So this will probably be a mix of both. Not to exceed the amount that was proposed, but some of it might be past and some of it will probably be future. But we've got to go through the substantiation of that with the grantee.
Thank you.
Yes. Anyone else? Any comments before we end today? All right. Then we will thank you all for your time with us today, and these two proposals. We will get moving on them, and hope to be joined next week again by Sally, and then 2 weeks from now when you all convene again, met by Sally as well. So I want to thank everybody for your time and effort, and we'll leave it there. See you all later.
Bye-bye. Have a great afternoon.